And my latest book, which is coming out this year, is called Meet Me in Mumbai. And this is a story told in two parts. The first part is about Aisha, who is 17 years old and is in the States. She's in the US to finish her 2 years of high school. She's come from India. And she meets a boy and falls in love with him, and she gets pregnant. And after she finds out that she's pregnant, unfortunately, she can't get a hold of her boyfriend, who has sort of disappeared, and she can't get in touch with him. And so now she has to deal with this situation herself. The second part of the book is about her daughter, when the daughter is almost 18 and she's trying to reconnect and trying to find her roots and trying to figure out how she fits into her life. So I want to really talk about why I chose to write for teens and why I became a writer. So when I was younger, I was reading books where I never ever saw myself in any of the stories. None of the adventures were happening to people who looked like me. And I think over time, I sort of internalized this belief that people like me didn't belong in stories that were fun and adventurous, or just in general, any stories that I was reading. In fact, I was writing stories myself in elementary school. Nobody ever saw them. And yet all the characters in my own stories were white. It never occurred to me to put, even in my own stories, to put characters that looked like me. And at the time, I didn't realize how sad this really is. I only realized that much, much later. But shockingly, I had never read a book with a character who looked like me or about somebody from my background until I was 26 years old. And I remember that feeling when I found this book, and it was a book of short stories about the immigrant experience. And it was written by an Indian American author. And I was so blown away by this feeling I had that these people's lives were just like mine. These people's experiences were so similar to mine. I felt as if the author had somehow got a sneak peek into my heart and taken the stories out of there. And that feeling was so profound. Just realizing that our stories mattered, that after years and years of thinking that our stories didn't matter, that nobody would want to hear or read stories about experiences that I was having. And at the time, I was myself a recent immigrant to the United States. And these characters were going through all these things that I was feeling, the homesickness, the loneliness, the kind of this fear, and the excitement at the same time of starting a new life in a new country. And it was hard for me because at the time I wasn't surrounded by people who would understand. And so I didn't have anyone to talk to about these particular things. And so reading these stories was so, it was so validating for me. And so fast forward like 15 years later, when my kids were teens and they were reading young adult stories, young adult books, and I started reading young adult along with them, just so we could discuss the stories. And I realized that they were still not seeing characters who looked like them, even now, even at that time. And that to me was really sort of the breaking point where I told myself, I've always wanted to write a book, and I would just do it. I would write a story about people who were like my kids, about characters who were like my own daughters and their friends. And so that was why I ended up writing the first book, The Love and Lives of Roxana Ali. And what I try to do in most of my stories is to test my characters, which is really the theme for our little event here today. And what I like to do, why I like to do that, is because I feel when my characters are struggling with making tough decisions, or if they're faced with tough choices, it's a really great way when you're writing a character and you want them to be realistic and impactful, and you want their behavior and their decisions to be impactful. It really helps if they do have something to wrestle with, because it really shows their character, how they handle it, whether it's in a good way or a bad way, or if they make the right or the wrong choices. I find that putting them in these situations where they have to sort of dig themselves out, um, really shows the reader what they're like. It gives them a deeper look inside the character, and I really enjoy that. And it sounds kind of cruel, but I do love to put my characters into these very tough situations. And I love it when I get feedback from readers and they say that they cried, because I'm a ghoul like that. But anyway, what I want to do really is read a little bit from my upcoming novel, Meet Me in Mumbai. And just to set up a little bit, uh, um, the main character, Aisha, is the one that's pregnant. That's the first half of the book. And she's now very pregnant, and she's about to graduate from high school because she moved away, to hide her pregnancy. She moved away and she's living with the couple who's going to adopt her baby after it's born. But she's also obviously finishing up high school because she doesn't want to drop out of school. She wants to finish her education before the baby's born. And so she is, it's the day of her graduation, and has been wrestling with her decision from the moment she found out that she was pregnant. And because our theme today is tough choices and, second chances, I thought this would be an appropriate part to read from. So here I go. Graduation is almost upon us. Everything is strange, like I'm living someone else's life. Most days, I have no desire or strength to get out of bed. I'm getting ready to move out of Mel and Sam's place right after graduation, before the baby comes in August, because I know it'll kill me to see them coming home with my baby. I know I won't be able to put myself through that. Besides, my current bedroom is going to be the baby's nursery, so I've made arrangements with the family that hosts international students. It's hard to get excited about graduation when just a few months ago, Natasha and I were talking about it with such hope. Natasha is her best friend back when she was living in Illinois, which is where she met her boyfriend. But now she's in Texas, where the adoptive parents have, kindly let her stay with them until she has the baby. So she's thinking about how she was so excited just a few months ago, discussing, making plans for graduation with her best friend. And now just to her whole life is so different that she can't even recognize it almost. It's hard to get excited about graduation when just a few months ago, Natasha and I were talking about it with such hope. We still talk often, but it's not the same. She'll always be my best friend. And her life is so different from mine right now. She's looking forward to going to prom with Brian and shopping for a college dorm room. I'm trying to face the fact that in a couple of months, I'll be leaving my baby. It's not exactly an easy segue in the conversation, and I don't want to bring her down when she's so excited. It's been difficult getting close to anyone at school here, and part of it is because I really don't want to. So I stick mostly to myself, even leaving the house for long walks whenever Mel and Sam are home. I'm happy and resentful at the same time whenever I hear them talking about the baby in hushed tones. It's getting harder and harder each day, but I try my best not to let my true feelings show when I'm around them. It's the very least I can do after everything they're doing for me. I put my hands on my belly, which is approximately the size of a very large watermelon. A kind of calm settles over me. I read that stress isn't good for the baby, and I've been trying my best to stay positive. It's really challenging to move around, even though my due date is still more than 2 months away. I don't even want to think how much worse it'll get. I can't help thinking about how different everything would be if I was back home in Mumbai. Ammi would probably fuss over me and make sure I was eating enough fruit and veggies and that I was getting plenty of fresh air. She would also make sure I was being pampered with foot massages and back rubs. She would rub coconut oil in my hair, her hands moving gently on my scalp, taking the heat out and leaving it cool and tingly. Abu would make sure I had all my favorite things to eat, like shrimp, malai curry, and bhel puri. He would make his raita for me because, as far as I was concerned, no one made it the way he did, with just the perfect amounts of black salt, cumin, and sugar combined with the yogurt, onion, and tomatoes. And Abu would get me mints. Ever since I was a little girl, he always made sure he had a steady supply of polo mints on hand because I was addicted to them. It's funny how the things I miss aren't the big ones, but the small, mundane acts of thoughtfulness. As always, my ruminations end with reality when reality comes crashing through. If Ammi and Abu could see me now, their heads would be bowed with shame, and they would wonder what happened to the daughter they raised. Once again, I ask myself if I'm making a huge mistake, if maybe I can still tell them everything. Maybe they'll be angry and disappointed at first, but then they'll come to understand that I loved Suresh and that I wanted to be with him forever, and that this baby is a symbol of our feelings for each other. But then the anger I feel towards Suresh comes barging in, and I know I can never forgive him for abandoning me like this, and that every time I look at my baby, it will serve as a reminder that I was foolish enough to trust someone with my whole heart and my body. I don't know if I can bear that for the rest of my life. No, it's better this way. I have to make a clean break and find a way to go on with my life, knowing that my baby is with a good, loving family who will love her the way she deserves. So that's the little excerpt I was wanting to share with you. And which brings us right to our first prompt. Aisha has to make these she's 17 years old, and yet the decisions she's been making these last few months have been so hard, even for an adult. And she's never sure if she's made the right decision. She can only do the best. She's doing her best. She's trying to take everything into consideration, and in the end, she's doing what she thinks is best for her baby and also for her parents at home, because she really loves them, and she doesn't want to shame them, because in her mind, if they find out what's happening, they would be shamed in their community, and so she can't do that to them. She doesn't want to be that daughter that does that to them, and she also wants to be like, she knows she can't be a good mother by herself, and so she has had to make a very tough choice, and even up to the last minute she's questioning whether it's the right one. So I would love to hear from all of you, what has been a tough choice you've had to make that has changed the course of your life, and did it make you feel empowered to make that choice? So the second prompt is, has there been a time when your decision has affected someone else, or when someone else's decision has affected you? And it kind of ties back to the little response I just read, where, people's decision to accept us as we are can affect us, and a decision that we make, whether it's in that same circumstance, or a decision that we make obviously can affect other people too. And sometimes it's really hard, because when you're making that decision, or when you're faced with that choice, you have to consider all of these things, and that just makes it harder. If there are loved ones involved, that makes it twice as hard, and so you need to have extra courage and extra conviction to make those decisions. So I'm so excited to hear what you all share next. Here's the last prompt, which is, if you had the chance to do it all over again, would you do it differently? Or are you happy with your decisions, and would you not do anything differently? Very excited to see what you'll say.
For all of you who didn't get a chance to ask any questions you might have, that is okay. You can stay connected with Sabina on Instagram at Sabina_writer, also on Twitter. And you can also email her at sabinawriter@gmail.com. And finally, thank you so much, Sabina. This has been truly, for me, a really special workshop. I feel very seen by it, and it's really just filled my cup. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for everyone at Girls Right Now and Scholastic. I really enjoyed myself. Thanks.